The metal door slammed shut behind Jack Harmon with a hollow finality that made his stomach drop. The emergency lights flickered above, casting an eerie red glow across the concrete walls of what he now realized was no ordinary storm shelter. His weathered hands trembled as he stared at the classified military insignia emblazoned on the inner wall, identical to the one on the badges of the men in black suits currently surrounding his farmhouse 50 feet above. "Mr. Harmon," crackled a voice through an ancient intercom system he hadn't noticed before. "We know you're down there. What you've discovered is a matter of national security. Please exit immediately." Jack's throat went dry. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether the forecast rain would delay his harvest. Now, he was trapped underground in a Cold War relic with government agents at his door, and what appeared to be. He squinted at the dusty control panel in disbelief, launch codes still intact. "Mr. Harmon," the voice repeated, more urgent this time. "You have 30 seconds to comply before we enter by force." Jack's mind raced through the events of the past day, desperately trying to understand how discovering an old bunker on his own property had led to this moment, and why the CIA seemed so desperate to get inside. Yesterday had begun like any other autumn morning on the Harmon family farm. The property had been in Jack's family for 4 generations, stretching across 300 acres of prime Nebraska farmland. At 53, Jack knew every inch of his property, or so he thought. He'd been clearing an overgrown section at the far eastern edge of his land, an area that had been left wild for decades. His plan was to expand his corn production next season, taking advantage of rising grain prices. The tractor's plow had struck something solid with a metallic clang that sent a shudder through the entire machine. "What in God's name?" Jack muttered, cutting the engine and climbing down. The impact had shifted the earth, revealing what looked like a metal hatch partially concealed by decades of soil and vegetation. Jack brushed away dirt with calloused hands, uncovering a rusted wheel mechanism that hadn't seen daylight since before he was born. His neighbor Ellie Weber, a retired history teacher who often walked the boundary between their properties, appeared as if summoned by the discovery itself. "Jack, what have you got there?" Ellie called, making her way through the tall grass, her border collie racing ahead. "Not sure," Jack replied, still brushing away dirt. "Some kind of hatch or door, must have been here all this time." Ellie approached, her curiosity piqued. At 72, she moved slower than she once had, but her mind remained sharp. "This area was government land back in the 50s and 60s, she said, kneeling beside him with a grunt. "Your grandfather bought it in 71 when they were liquidating assets." Jack hadn't known this detail. Dad never mentioned anything unusual about this section. "Might not have known," Ellie said, examining the revealed metal. "Look at these markings, military by the look of it." Jack nodded, his heart rate quickening as he turned the wheel. It resisted at first, then gave way with a screech of protest that sent nearby birds scattering. The hatch opened, revealing a dark shaft with metal rungs descending into blackness. "You're not going down there, are you?" Ellie asked, concern evident in her voice. Jack was already retrieving the flashlight from his truck. Just a quick look, probably just an old storage bunker. "Whatever it is, it's been sealed for a reason, Jack," Ellie warned, her historian's instincts flaring. "At least let someone know you're going down." Jack brushed off her concern with a wave. "I'll be 5 minutes. If I'm not back, send in the cavalry." He grinned, but Ellie didn't return the smile. The descent took longer than expected. The shaft extended at least 30 feet below ground, each rung slick with condensation. When Jack's boots finally touched concrete, he swept his flashlight around, revealing a short corridor ending at another sealed door. This one opened more easily, revealing a room roughly the size of his living room. Years of farming had taught Jack to be observant, and even in the dim light, he immediately noted several concerning details. The room was pristine, with no dust or cobwebs. A digital keypad beside a second door showed a small green light, and most alarmingly, the air was fresh. Someone had been here recently. Jack hesitated, suddenly aware of Ellie's warning. But curiosity overpowered caution, a Harmon family trait his late wife had often criticized. He approached the second door, noting it had no visible handle or wheel. Only the keypad offered any means of entry. On a hunch, he tried the most obvious code, 1234. To his surprise, the light flashed green, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The space beyond made Jack's breath catch. No longer a simple bunker, the facility stretched out before him, a fully equipped underground complex. Fluorescent lights flickered to life automatically, illuminating a command center straight out of a Cold War film. Banks of outdated computers lined the walls, their screens dark but status lights blinking. Maps of the United States, the Soviet Union, and what appeared to be missile trajectories covered one wall entirely. "Jesus Christ," Jack whispered, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. He moved deeper into the facility, past the command center into what appeared to be living quarters. 6 small bedrooms with military-style bunks, a kitchen area with preserved rations, and a medical bay with equipment still in plastic. Everything was meticulously maintained, as though waiting for occupants who never arrived. Jack checked his watch. He'd been underground for nearly an hour. Ellie would be getting worried. He decided to take a few photos with his phone before heading back up, documentation to show authorities. This wasn't something a farmer from Nebraska should handle alone. As he raised his phone, he noticed it had no signal expected, given how far underground he was. What he didn't expect was the notification on his screen. New Wi-Fi network available, Raven Secure. An active Wi-Fi network in an abandoned government bunker on his property. Jack's hand froze midair. The implications crashed over him in waves. This facility wasn't abandoned. Someone was maintaining it. Someone with government clearance accessing his land without his knowledge. He needed to get out to contact the proper authorities. Jack turned back toward the entrance, but a flashing red light on one of the computer terminals caught his attention. Drawn like a moth to flame, he approached the screen, now displaying a single message. Proximity alert. Security protocol ACTIVATED. Panic surged through Jack's body. Had he triggered some kind of alarm? He rushed back to the entrance, taking the metal rungs 2 at a time, emerging into the fatting afternoon light with his heart pounding. The farm looked peaceful, unchanged. No sirens, no response teams. Perhaps the system was just ancient, triggering false alarms after decades of disuse. Jack secured the hatch and drove his tractor back to the barn, trying to process what he'd discovered. Over dinner, he debated calling the county sheriff but decided to sleep on it. Government property or not, the bunker was on his land his family had owned for decades. He deserved answers before inviting official scrutiny. Sleep came fitfully that night, his dreams filled with red lights and warning sirens. The sound that woke Jack wasn't part of his dreams. A vehicle was coming up his long gravel driveway, headlights sweeping across his bedroom wall at 4:38 a.m. according to his bedside clock. Then another, and another. By the time Jack pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, 4 black SUVs had surrounded his farmhouse. Men in dark suits poured out, taking positions around the property with military precision. This was no local sheriff's response. Jack's hands trembled as he dialed Ellie's number. "They're here," he said when she answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Government types, a dozen at least." "What did you do, Jack?" Ellie asked, fully awake despite the hour. "Nothing, I just looked around, took some pictures." He moved away from the window as a suit-clad figure approached his front door. "I think I triggered something." A sharp knock interrupted him. "Mr. Harmon, this is Special Agent Daniel Mercer. We need to speak with you immediately." "Jack," Ellie's voice was tight with concern, Don't tell them anything until I get my nephew on the phone. He's a lawyer in Omaha." "No time," Jack replied, watching as more agents circled his house. "I'll call you back." He ended the call and opened the door, coming face to face with a man in his 40s with close-cropped hair and eyes that revealed nothing. "Mr. Harmon," the agent said, showing a badge too quickly for Jack to verify. "We need to discuss the federal facility on your property." "That bunker's been abandoned for 50 years, Jack countered. "My family's owned this land since 1971. "I'm afraid that's not entirely accurate," Agent Mercer replied, his expression unchanging. "May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. 2 additional agents were already flanking the first, their presence making it clear refusal wasn't an option. Jack stepped aside, allowing them entry. In his kitchen, Agent Mercer spread out documents on the table, property deeds, classified government papers, and satellite images of Jack's farm with the bunker location clearly marked. "When your grandfather purchased this land, certain exclusions were written into the deed," Mercer explained, pointing to fine print Jack had never seen before. "The underground facility remained federal property, with perpetual access rights retained by designated government agencies." "That's impossible," Jack protested. "I've seen the deed, there's nothing about." "A classified addendum," Mercer interrupted, sliding another document forward, "kept separate from public records for national security reasons." Jack stared at the yellowed paper, his grandfather's signature unmistakable at the bottom. "What is that place? Some kind of missile silo?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss that," Mercer replied. "What I can tell you is that you triggered a security protocol yesterday by entering the facility. We need to know exactly what you saw and did while inside." Jack detailed his exploration, describing the command center, living quarters, and the strange Wi-Fi network. With each detail, the agents exchanged glances, their concern visibly mounting. "And you accessed nothing, powered up no systems," Mercer pressed. "No, just looked around," Jack answered. "Though something was already powered up. That Wi-Fi signal, the keypad, someone's been maintaining that place." Mercer's expression remained neutral, but his posture stiffened. "Mr. Harmon, we need you to take us to the facility entrance now." Jack glanced out the window, where dawn was just breaking over his cornfields. "Am I in some kind of trouble here? Because if so, I should probably call a lawyer." "This isn't a legal matter, Mr. Harmon. It's a matter of national security," Mercer said, his tone sharpening. "The facility you entered contains sensitive materials that have been dormant for decades. Your intrusion may have activated legacy systems that need immediate attention." Something in Mercer's urgency felt off to Jack. If they had known about the facility all along, why the panic over his discovery? And if they hadn't known, well, that raised even more troubling questions. "Let me get my boots," Jack said, stalling for time. He stepped into his bedroom, quietly sliding open his bedside drawer where he kept an old voice recorder, a relic from when he used to record farming notes. He pressed record and slipped it into his shirt pocket. As they drove toward the eastern edge of his property, Jack noticed a figure watching from Ellie's farmhouse window. He hoped she'd made that call to her lawyer nephew. At the bunker entrance, Mercer instructed his team to establish a perimeter. "Mr. Harmon, we'll need the access code." "Just did 1234, Jack replied, watching Mercer's face closely. The agent blinked in surprise. That worked. A slip that confirmed Jack's suspicion. These men didn't have full information about the facility. Mercer quickly recovered, directing 2 agents to descend first, followed by Jack and himself. Inside the bunker's main chamber, the agents moved with practiced efficiency, photographing everything while another team set up equipment to access the dormant computer systems. Jack was instructed to sit in a corner, watched by a junior agent who looked barely out of college. Mercer and his technical specialist huddled around the main terminal, their voices too low for Jack to hear. Only fragments reached him. Activation sequence, signal transmission, satellite uplink. After 30 minutes, Mercer approached Jack, his demeanor markedly different, tenser, more urgent. "Mr. Harmon, I need to know exactly what buttons or controls you touched in here." "None," Jack insisted. "I just looked around." Mercer's jaw tightened. The system logs show an authentication sequence was initiated yesterday at 1742 hours. Someone with high-level clearance accessed this terminal remotely after your presence triggered the proximity sensors. Fear crawled up Jack's spine. "Wasn't me." "Then we have a problem," Mercer said, checking his watch. "Because according to these logs, this facility is now awaiting final authorization for an operation designated Broken Arrow, a term associated with nuclear weapons." The room seemed to tilt beneath Jack's feet. "Nuclear, on my farm?" "Not exactly," Mercer replied grimly. "This isn't a missile silo, Mr. Harmon. It's a command node for a network of offshore platforms. A Cold War deadman switch designed to ensure second strike capability even if Washington was destroyed." Jack struggled to process this, but the Cold War's been over for decades. "Systems like these were never fully decommissioned," Mercer explained. "Too risky to dismantle, too sensitive to acknowledge. They were placed in dormancy, monitored remotely. Until yesterday." One of the technicians called urgently from the main console. Mercer hurried over, leaving Jack with his increasingly terrifying thoughts. When Mercer returned, his face had gone pale. "Mr. Harmon, we're implementing emergency containment procedures. This facility is now under lockdown." "What does that mean?" Jack demanded. "It means no one enters or leaves until we resolve the security breach," Mercer stated. "My team topside is establishing a quarantine zone around your property." Jack thought of Ellie and his other neighbors. You can't just lock down an entire community based on some glitch in a forgotten bunker. "This is no glitch," Mercer snapped, his composure cracking. "Someone with active clearance remotely accessed this system after decades of dormancy. They authenticated using codes that shouldn't still work, and now the system is counting down to synchronization with 5 other nodes across the country." A young female agent approached, whispering something in Mercer's ear. His expression darkened further. "We've lost contact with our surface team," he announced to the room. "Communications are being jammed across the spectrum." Jack stood, alarm overriding caution. "Let me go up. This is my home, my neighbors." "Sir, we cannot allow," Mercer began, but Jack was already moving toward the exit ladder. 2 agents blocked his path, but Jack was farm-strong and fueled by fear for his community. He pushed past them, grabbing the ladder rungs. He'd climbed halfway up when Mercer's voice rang out. "Lock it down now." The hydraulic hiss of the bunker's inner door ceiling shut echoed through the chamber. Above Jack, the heavy metal hatch closed with mechanical precision, the locking mechanism engaging with a decisive clunk. Jack descended slowly, turning to face Mercer and his team. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know," Mercer admitted, the first honest uncertainty he'd shown. "But whatever it is, it's bigger than your trespassing in an old bunker. All communications are being actively jammed, which means someone doesn't want us calling for help." "Or doesn't want you warning someone," Jack countered, years of dealing with grain merchants having honed his ability to read people. "You people aren't CIA, are you?" Mercer's silence confirmed Jack's suspicion. "Then who?" Jack began, but the lights suddenly dimmed as the facility switched to emergency power. The main screen flickered, then displayed a new message that made both Jack and Mercer freeze. "Authorization confirmed. Operation Broken Arrow ACTIVATED. Transmission COMMNCNGN 120000." A countdown clock began ticking down from 12 hours. "What happens when that reaches zero?" Jack asked, already dreading the answer. Before Mercer could respond, the communication system crackled to life. "Attention personnel in Heartland Node 5, came a voice, clinical and detached. "This facility has been remotely commandeered for national security purposes. Remain in place. Interference with the transmission countdown will result in immediate termination protocols. This is not a drill." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't in control of the facility. Someone else was, someone with the highest clearance levels and apparent willingness to activate a Cold War doomsday system. And the metal door had slammed shut behind Jack Harmon with a hollow finality that made his stomach drop. The emergency lights flickered above, casting an eerie red glow across the concrete walls of what he now realized was no ordinary storm shelter. His weathered hands trembled as he stared at the classified military insignia emblazoned on the inner wall, identical to the one on the badges of the men in black suits currently trapped with him. "Mr. Harmon," crackled the voice through the ancient intercom system, "what you've discovered is much more significant than you realize, and now, I'm afraid, you're part of history in the making." "Who are you people?" Jack demanded, facing Mercer across the command center. "If you're not CIA, then who?" Mercer's team exchanged glances, their earlier composure crumbling as the red emergency lights bathed the underground facility in an ominous glow. The countdown on the main screen continued its relentless march. 11, 58, 42, 11, 58, 41. "We're with the Defense Intelligence Agency," Mercer finally admitted. "We monitor forgotten Cold War infrastructure. This facility wasn't supposed to be operational." "Yet here we are," Jack said, gesturing to the active screens around them, "locked in with a doomsday clock." One of the younger agents, a woman with cropped dark hair who'd introduced herself as Chen, was examining a dusty technical manual retrieved from a storage locker. "Sir, according to this, Heartland Node 5 was designed to transmit activation codes to underwater launch platforms in the Pacific." "Launch platforms, as in missiles?" Jack asked, his mouth dry. "Obsolete ones," Mercer replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "The submarines were decommissioned decades ago." "Then why are we locked in here? Why is someone activating this system now?" Jack pressed. Before Mercer could respond, a new message flashed across the main screen. "Satellite uplink established. RECIVING authentication from NODES 1, 3, and 6. 3 other nodes are active," Chen reported, her voice tight with tension. "The system was designed to require 4 of the 6 nodes for execution." "Execution of what exactly?" Jack demanded. Mercer ran a hand over his face. Operation Broken Arrow wasn't just a second strike capability. It was designed as a reset option, a complete strategic reshuffling of global power. Simultaneous strikes against multiple nations, allies included, creating a power vacuum that only America would survive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about launching a few forgotten missiles. It was about reshaping the entire world order. "That's insane," Jack whispered. "Who would want to activate something like that now?" As if in answer, the communication system crackled again. "Agent Mercer," the voice said, now tinged with amusement. "I assumed DIA would respond first, always watching the forgotten corners." Mercer approached the console cautiously. "Identify yourself." "Now that would spoil the drama, wouldn't it?" the voice replied. "But I believe Mr. Harmon deserves to know why his quiet farm has become ground zero for history. After all, it's not every day a civilian stumbles into the heart of Operation Midnight." "Operation Midnight," Jack repeated. "I thought it was Broken Arrow." A quiet laugh came through the speakers. Broken Arrow was the official designation. Midnight was the name given by those of us who understood its true purpose: Tell me, Mr. Harmon, do you know why your grandfather was able to purchase that land in 1971? Jack hesitated, caught off guard by the personal question. The government was liquidating assets. Half right, the voice replied. The government was eliminating witnesses. Everyone who owned property within 5 miles of each node was quietly relocated. Your grandfather wasn't randomly selected as a buyer, he was chosen. Former military, decorated in Korea, politically reliable. Jack felt as though the concrete floor had dropped away beneath him. My grandfather was part of this. Not knowingly, the voice assured him. He was a failsafe, a reliable citizen who would maintain the land, keep it private, and never dig too deep. Each node had a guardian family, the Harmons, the Volkovs, the Tanakas, the Schmidts, the Nguyens, the Clarks. 6 families, 6 nodes. Sir, Chen interrupted, showing Mercer something on her tablet. I've cross-referenced these names. They all own farmland in different states, and all of them reported unusual government activity on their properties within the last 24 hours. The voice chuckled. Very good, Agent Chen. Yes, all 6 nodes are now under my control, though only 4 are necessary for activation. Mercer slammed his palm on the console. Who are you? What's your endgame here? You can call me Director, the voice replied. As for my endgame, the same as it was when we built these facilities. American primacy secured once and for all. The Cold War is over, Jack interjected. Russia isn't the Soviet Union anymore. This was never just about the Soviets, Mr. Harmon, the director responded. It was about creating a controlled reset. The world has become too complex, too interdependent, too many rivals emerging, too many alliances shifting. What we need is simplicity, clarity. Through nuclear fire, Mercer said bitterly. You're talking about killing millions. I'm talking about saving billions, the director countered. The projections were clear in 1968 and they're clearer now. Resource depletion, climate collapse, population pressures. Without intervention, global civilization collapses by 2050. With a controlled reset now, we preserve the essential framework of human achievement. The cold, calculated madness of it chilled Jack to his core. This wasn't some rogue agent or terrorist. This was someone who believed they were saving humanity through strategic destruction. Chen had moved to another terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Sir, I might have a way to override the countdown, but I need access to the primary control systems. Which are? Mercer asked. Behind that, Chen replied, pointing to a heavy steel door marked Primary Systems on the far wall. The director's voice returned, amused. Don't waste your time. That room requires biometric authentication from a level 7 administrator. None of you qualify. Jack glanced at his watch. Over 11 hours remained on the countdown. So what now? We just sit here and watch while you reshape the world. Not at all, Mr. Harmon, the director said. You're going to help me complete the authentication process. Jack exchanged a bewildered look with Mercer. I'm a farmer. I don't have access to anything. But you do, the director replied. Your DNA does. The final failsafe was genetic, a direct descendant of each guardian family present at their respective node. Your grandfather wasn't just chosen for his reliability, Mr. Harmon. His genetic profile was entered into the system, and through you, that profile endures. The implications crashed over Jack in waves. His entire family history, a lie. His land, his legacy, all part of some monstrous contingency plan. I won't help you, Jack stated flatly. You already have, the director replied. The moment you entered the facility, your biometrics were scanned. The system just needs your conscious participation. A voice print saying, I authorize activation, while your hand is on the authentication panel. Jack's resolve hardened. Then you'll be waiting a long time. Perhaps, the director conceded. Or perhaps not. Agent Mercer, I assume your team is armed. One might find motivation with a gun to one's head. Mercer straightened. We're federal agents, not murderers. Noble, the director commented, but unnecessary. Mr. Harmon will cooperate when he understands what's at stake, not just for the world but for Ellie Weber. Jack froze. What about Ellie? Your neighbor is currently entertaining guests from my security team, the director explained. Lovely woman, former teacher, makes exceptional blueberry muffins according to her recipe box. If you've heard her, Jack began, his voice shaking with rage. She's perfectly safe, the director assured him, and will remain so provided you cooperate. The same applies to the other Guardian families. Cooperation ensures their safety. Jack looked at Mercer, whose expression had darkened. He's bluffing. He doesn't have teams at all 6 locations. Would you bet Ellie's life on that? The director asked. Or the lives of everyone within range of Node 3's self-destruct mechanism? Self-destruct, Chen echoed. That's not in any of the documentation. There's a great deal missing from the official documentation, Agent Chen, the director said. Each node contains a substantial explosive charge, enough to contaminate the surrounding 10 square miles with radioactive material. Insurance against interference. Jack sank into a chair, the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him. Countless lives against Ellie, against his neighbors, the abstract versus the immediate. You have 1 hour to decide, Mr. Harmon, the director said. After that, I begin eliminating incentives, starting with Ms. Weber. The communication system went silent, leaving them in the eerie hum of ancient equipment and the soft beeping of the countdown. He's lying, Mercer insisted, though doubt colored his voice. This is psychological manipulation. Can you be sure? Jack asked quietly. Can you guarantee Ellie's safety, the safety of everyone within 10 miles of here? Mercer had no answer. Chen approached, her tablet displaying a schematic of the facility. Sir, there might be another option. The ventilation system has a maintenance access that wasn't on the original blueprints. It might lead to the surface. Jack's hope flickered briefly. How do you know that? I found maintenance logs in the system, Chen explained. Dated 1992, much more recent than the facility's supposed abandonment. Someone has been servicing these nodes all along. The director, Mercer guessed, or people working for him, a decades-long conspiracy waiting for the right moment. Or the wrong one, Jack added grimly. They located the maintenance access behind a panel in one of the sleeping quarters. The shaft was narrow, too small for most of Mercer's team, but Jack's lean farmer's build might manage it. Even if you reach the surface, what then? Mercer asked. The director's people will be watching. Jack's jaw set with determination. I know this land, every creek, every hollow. They don't. You'll need to verify Ellie's situation and contact outside help, Mercer instructed, handing Jack his satellite phone. It's hardened against standard jamming, but I don't know if it'll work against whatever the director's using. If it does, call this number. Tell them Foxhound is compromised and give our location. Jack took the phone, tucking it into his pocket alongside his still-recording voice recorder. What will you do here? Keep looking for a way to stop the countdown, Mercer replied. Chen's good. If anyone can crack this system, she can. The ventilation shaft was even tighter than it appeared, forcing Jack to wriggle forward inch by painful inch. The metal walls pressed against his shoulders, the darkness broken only by the dim light of the emergency flashlight Mercer had given him. After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, Jack felt a change in the air, fresher, cooler. He emerged from a concealed outlet behind a thicket of scrub oak, a quarter-mile from where he discovered the bunker entrance. Night had fallen, but the full moon provided enough light to navigate by. In the distance, Jack could see lights, vehicles surrounding his farmhouse, and more worryingly, Ellie's as well. Staying low, Jack made his way through the cornfield, using the tall stalks as cover. When he reached the edge of Ellie's property, he could see men in tactical gear patrolling the perimeter. Through her kitchen window, Jack glimpsed Ellie herself, sitting at her table with a man in a suit across from her. She was alive, apparently unharmed, but clearly under guard. Jack retreated to a drainage ditch that ran between their properties, one of many features invisible to anyone who hadn't worked this land for decades. He tried Mercer's satellite phone, but as feared, no signal penetrated whatever jamming technology the director had deployed. He needed to reach Ellie to verify her safety and perhaps find a way to contact outside help, but approaching the house directly would be suicide. Then Jack remembered something from their childhood, the storm drain that connected their properties, installed when both farms were one large estate. It was small, intended only for water runoff, but as children he and Ellie had used it to pass notes during summer storms. The entrance was overgrown now, hidden beneath blackberry brambles that tore at Jack's hands as he cleared them away. The pipe was barely 2 feet in diameter, a tight fit for a grown man, but desperation drove him forward, crawling on his belly through decades of silt and debris. 20 agonizing minutes later, Jack emerged behind Ellie's toolshed, his clothes soaked and filthy. From this vantage point, he could see the kitchen more clearly. Ellie sat calmly, her border collie at her feet. The man across from her was speaking, his gestures suggesting a conversation rather than an interrogation. Jack circled the shed, staying in shadows until he reached the back door. Ellie always left it unlocked, a rural habit she refused to break despite his warnings. Tonight, that stubbornness might save lives. He slipped inside, wincing at the familiar creak of the door hinge. The border collie's ears perked up, but years of familiarity kept it from barking. Instead, it rose and padded toward Jack, tail wagging in recognition. "Not now, boy," Jack whispered, patting the dog's head. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Ellie's and a man's. Jack couldn't make out the words, but the tone seemed conversational, almost cordial. He crept closer, straining to hear. "Understand your concern, Ms. Weber," the man was saying, "but I assure you this is a routine security exercise. Your cooperation is greatly appreciated." "At 4 in the morning, Ellie replied skeptically. "With armed men surrounding my house, I wasn't born yesterday, young man." "Security protocols require thoroughness," the man responded smoothly. "Once we've cleared the area, everything can return to normal." "And Jack, what about him?" "Mr. Harmon is assisting other agents with a matter of national security. He's perfectly safe." Jack had heard enough. This man was clearly working for the director, keeping Ellie occupied while the countdown continued. He needed to warn her, to find a way past the guards and reach help. The solution came from an unexpected quarter. Ellie's voice rose suddenly, sharp with alarm. "My medication. I need my heart medication. It's in the bathroom cabinet." The suited man hesitated. "I'll have one of my men get it." "It's a specific dosage," Ellie insisted. "I need to get it myself, unless you want a medical emergency on your hands. My lawyer would have quite a lot to say about that." Jack smiled grimly. Ellie had no heart condition or lawyer. She was creating an opportunity, and she had no idea he was there to take advantage of it. "Fine," the man conceded, "but I'll accompany you." Jack pressed himself against the wall as Ellie and the suit walked past the hallway toward the bathroom. The moment they were out of sight, he darted into the kitchen, searching for Ellie's cell phone. He found it on the counter, already unlocked, another piece of rural stubbornness that now proved valuable. No signal as expected, but the landline on the wall might work. Jack lifted the receiver, dead silence. They'd cut the physical lines. A bathroom door closed down the hall. Jack had seconds at most. His eyes fell on Ellie's old radio in the corner, a ham operator's set, a hobby she'd picked up from her late husband. If standard communications were being jammed, perhaps alternative frequencies might break through. Jack had no time to test the theory. He scrawled a quick note on Ellie's notepad: bunker danger, need help, use radio emergency channel, and retreated back the way he came, slipping out the door just as Ellie and the suit returned to the kitchen. Outside, Jack circled toward the front of the house, keeping to the shadows. He needed to see how many men the director had deployed, to assess whether any direct action was possible. What he saw froze his blood. Beyond the 4 vehicles he'd already observed, a convoy of additional black SUVs was arriving. Men in tactical gear established a wider perimeter, setting up equipment that looked like portable signal jammers. This was no small operation. The director had deployed significant resources, which meant his threats were likely real. The other nodes, the other families, the self-destruct mechanisms, all of it suddenly felt terrifyingly plausible. Jack checked his watch. 30 minutes remained in the director's ultimatum. He had to get back to the bunker to warn Mercer about the reinforcements. He was halfway across his cornfield when floodlights suddenly blazed to life, illuminating the area like daylight. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Jack Harmon, we know you're out there. The director would like a word." Jack froze, caught in the open. A moment later, a familiar voice echoed across his farm. "Mr. Harmon," the director said, no longer filtered through an intercom but amplified for all to hear. "Impressive resourcefulness, escaping the bunker. You've proven yourself worthy of your grandfather's selection." "Show yourself," Jack shouted back, turning in a circle, trying to locate the source. "In due time," the director replied. "First, let's address your concerns. Ms. Weber is unharmed and will remain so, provided you return to the facility and complete the authentication." "Why me?" Jack demanded. "If you control all 6 nodes, why do you need me specifically?" "Because systems built to end the world require consensus," the director explained. "Not just from military and political authorities, but from the American heartland itself. Your grandfather and the other Guardians weren't just security, they were representatives. The system requires their bloodlines to consent." "And if I refuse?" Jack called out, still scanning for any sign of the director's location. "Then I activate the failsafe at Node 3, where the Tanaka family has already refused cooperation. A small price to ensure the greater salvation." Jack's mind raced. The Tanakas, another family like his, facing the same impossible choice. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Jack asked. "That you won't just kill Ellie and my neighbors anyway?" "Because I'm not a monster, Mr. Harmon," the director replied, his voice now coming from behind Jack. Jack spun around to face an elderly man emerging from between the corn rows. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and a bearing that suggested military training despite his advanced age. No weapons visible, no guards flanking him, just an old man who radiated absolute authority. "General William Dresden," the man introduced himself, extending a hand as casually as if they'd met at a town hall meeting. "Former head of Strategic Air Command, current director of Operation Midnight." Jack didn't take the offered hand. "You're insane." "I'm a pragmatist," Dresden corrected mildly. "I've seen the classified projections, Mr. Harmon. The world your children will inherit is doomed without intervention. Resource wars, climate refugees, societal collapse, billions dead through starvation and conflict. What I propose is surgical, millions now to save billions later." "It's not your decision to make," Jack argued. "No, it's ours," Dresden countered. "Yours and mine and the other Guardian families. A council representing humanity's best hope. 3 families have already consented. We need only 1 more." Jack studied the old general, searching for signs of deception or madness. Instead, he found absolute conviction, the serene certainty of a man who believed himself history's necessary villain. "And if I help you," Jack said slowly, Ellie and everyone here walks away. You have my word, Dresden replied. This area will be fully evacuated before any strategic operations commence. Your community will be relocated to a safe zone. Jack took a deep breath, weighing impossible choices. I need to speak with Mercer first. Dresden nodded, as if this were a reasonable business negotiation. Of course, my men will escort you back to the facility. Two armed guards materialized from the darkness, flanking Jack as they led him back toward the bunker entrance. Dresden followed at a distance, unhurried, a man with time on his side. At the bunker, Jack was escorted down the shaft, the heavy hatch closing behind them with ominous finality. In the command center, Mercer and his team looked up in surprise as Jack entered. Harmon, Mercer exclaimed, "We thought you'd made it out." "I did," Jack replied, his voice low. "The situation's worse than we thought. The director is here, General William Dresden. He's got reinforcements surrounding the entire area." Mercer's face drained of color. "Dresden, that's impossible. He died in 2010. "Very convincing obituary, wasn't it?" came Dresden's voice as the elderly general entered the command center. "Necessary for my work to continue unimpeded." Mercer stared in shock. "Sir, what are you doing? This operation was officially terminated decades ago." "Officially," Dresden agreed. "But some responsibilities transcend administrations and political whims. The Midnight Protocol was always meant to be activated at the moment of maximum strategic advantage." "And that's now?" Chen asked incredulously. "When the world is more interconnected and peaceful than ever?" Dresden smiled thinly. "Your historical perspective is limited, Agent Chen. We stand at a precipice. Rising powers challenging American hegemony. Climate systems approaching irreversible tipping points. Resource scarcity driving covert conflicts. Now is precisely the moment, while we still maintain technological supremacy." The countdown on the main screen showed less than 10 hours remaining. Dresden turned to Jack. "You've seen the truth of our situation, the resources I command, the inevitability of what comes next. Will you provide your authorization, Mr. Harmon? Will you save your community?" Jack felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The choice seemed impossible: complicity in mass murder or gambling with the lives of everyone he knew and loved. But something in Dresden's certainty had triggered Jack's farmer's intuition, the same sense that told him when a storm was coming despite clear skies, or when a machine was about to fail despite running smoothly. "You said 3 families have already consented," Jack said slowly. "Which ones?" Dresden's expression remained neutral. "The Schmidts, the Volkovs, and the Clarks." Jack turned to Chen. "You said you cross-referenced the family names earlier. What did you find?" Chen glanced nervously at Dresden before answering. "All 6 families own farmland in different states. All reported unusual government activity in the past 24 hours. "But," Jack pressed, sensing her hesitation. "But the Schmidt family died out in 1998, Chen admitted. "Their farm was sold to a corporation, and the Clark's property was seized by eminent domain in 2005 for a military base expansion." Jack turned back to Dresden, who remained impassive. "You're lying. You don't have 3 families. You might not have any." "A test, Mr. Harmon," Dresden replied smoothly. "To assess your attention to detail, commendable." But Jack had seen the momentary tightening around Dresden's eyes, a tell he recognized from decades of poker games at the VFW hall. "No, you need me specifically. Something's gone wrong with your plan." Dresden's facade of reasonable negotiation cracked slightly. "What I need is your authorization. The method of obtaining it is flexible." "Sir," one of Dresden's men interrupted, approaching with a tablet. "Perimeter reports unusual signal activity. Someone's broadcasting on emergency frequencies." Jack suppressed a smile. Ellie had found his note. Dresden's expression hardened. Find the source and terminate it. He turned to Jack. Your neighbor, I presume? Unfortunate. I had hoped to avoid collateral damage. Wait, Jack said quickly. I'll do it. I'll give authorization. But I need assurances, written orders for evacuation of the entire county, signed by you. Dresden studied him for a moment, then nodded. Reasonable. I'll have the documents prepared. He turned to his aide. Prepare the authentication panel. As Dresden moved toward the main console, Mercer caught Jack's eye, a silent question passing between them. Jack gave an imperceptible nod. General, Mercer said, drawing Dresden's attention, there's something you should know about the system updates from 1992. What updates? Dresden asked, momentarily distracted. It was the opening Jack needed. He lunged forward, tackling Dresden to the ground. The general was remarkably strong for his age, but decades of farm work had made Jack stronger. He pinned Dresden as Mercer, and his team overpowered the general's guards. This ends now, Jack growled, holding Dresden immobile. Dresden laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You're too late. The system is already locked in. Without your authorization, Node 3's failsafe activates when the countdown hits 0. Chen rushed to the main terminal. He's right, I can't override it remotely. You don't have to, Jack said. We just need to send our own message first. He pulled out the voice recorder that had been running in his pocket since he left the farmhouse. Everything you've said is here, General. Your plans, your threats, your lies. And thanks to Ellie, it's being broadcast on emergency channels right now. Dresden's expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty for the first time. No one will believe a farmer over a decorated general. They'll believe this, Mercer said, holding up his badge, and they'll believe her. He nodded toward Chen, who had her own credentials displayed. You still can't stop the countdown, Dresden insisted. Not without the biometric authorization. No, Jack agreed. But we can evacuate the area around Node 3. We can get innocents out of harm's way, and we can make sure you face justice. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Mercer's authentication allowed emergency broadcasts to override Dresden's jamming systems. National Guard units were dispatched to all 6 node locations. Dresden and his men were taken into custody. Jack watched as his community was evacuated, a precaution while experts worked to disarm Node 3's failsafe. Ellie sat beside him in the emergency command center that had been established at the county high school, her border collie at their feet. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly. He suspected something, you know. Never said exactly what, but he made me promise to keep an eye on you if anything strange ever happened. Jack turned to her in surprise. You knew. Not details, Ellie clarified. Just that there was something important about your land, something worth protecting. She squeezed his hand. Which is exactly what you did. 3 days later, Jack stood at the edge of his cornfield, watching as government workers sealed the bunker permanently. His farm would never be the same. The land now held too many secrets, too much history. But as the autumn sun warmed his face, Jack felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Dresden's twisted vision had been thwarted not by military might or political power, but by ordinary people choosing connection over fear, truth over convenient lies. Perhaps that was what his grandfather had really been guarding all along. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe for more hidden history narratives. Comment below with what you think might be hidden beneath your own hometown. Truth is often stranger than fiction.